So I also want to let you know about another upcoming, I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming lectures. So we're going to take the summer off from the Discovery Lecture Series, but Shark Week is July 16th through 22nd here at Cabrillo Marine Aquarium, and we're going to have a special Shark Week lecture on Friday, July 21st with Dr. Chris Lowe from California State University, Long Beach. Details will be posted on our website soon about how to RSVP for that lecture. And you can guess he's going to be talking about sharks. And then we will resume our 2023 Discovery Lectures in the fall. The next lecture will be on October 6th at 7 p.m. And our speaker will be Dr. Jesse Dillon from Cal State Long Beach. He's the department chair there. And then on December 1st, it will be Dr. Misty Peg-Tran from Cal State Fullerton. And we'll post everything on the website just like tonight. And it'll be hybrid, and you can watch from home, or you can reserve your spot here and get the parking pass. All right, last is just a reminder, if you missed any of our past lectures, or you hear about some of them and you're interested and go, man, I wish I could have seen that, we record all of our lectures. Zach Rich in the back, thank you so much, Zach, in the back is going to be recording the lecture. Alfonso Montiel is on the webinar. Thank you to both of you guys. We have Trinity in the front that's welcoming all you guys. Thank you to the staff for helping run this. But we record and then post all of our lectures on our website. So you can always go back and watch some of the lectures if there was one that you were interested in. You just go to the Discovery Lecture Series page and scroll down to the archives, or you can go to the Aquarium's YouTube page, and they're all organized there. So again, if you're interested in the upcoming lectures, the plan is to have all of them on site and as a hybrid. You can check our website for RSVP information. Okay.
The next?
The next. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce tonight's speaker, Beth Schaefer. Beth is the Director of Animal Programs at the Los Angeles Zoo. She is a native Angeleno and earned her degree in microbiology from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She started her zoo career at the Charles Paddock Zoo in Atascadero, California. The next 20 years, she moved around the country from Kansas City Zoo to Disney's Animal Kingdom, the Center for Great Apes, and the Houston Zoo before arriving happily back in Los Angeles. She has had the opportunity to work with many taxa, including primates, marine mammals, carnivores, and birds. In her role at the LA Zoo, she oversees all aspects of the animal care division. Beth is deeply committed to saving animals in the wild and sharing the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, AZA's, value of respect for wildlife and wild places. Beth is a steering committee member of AZA's Wildlife Conservation Committee and the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance. The Wildlife Conservation Committee oversees AZA's SAFE program, Saving Animals from Extinction. That's their flagship conservation effort. Yeah. Beth serves as the liaison to the orangutan and black rhino SAFE programs. Her involvement in the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance has involved playing a key role in the formation of the Southern California Wildlife Confiscation Network, which aids in law enforcement in caring for and placing animals affected by wildlife trafficking. The title of tonight's talk is Wildlife Trafficking, Why Zoos Matter. Thank you, and please help me welcome Beth Schaefer. Okay, thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Julie, for that intro. Can you hear me? Am I good? Okay. So I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight in person and everybody joining from home. Thank you so much. I know this isn't necessarily the happiest topic, but hopefully by the end we'll all have some reason for hope and some things that we can all do to help with the wildlife trafficking global situation, which is not good. I want to give one disclaimer. There's some slides that are a little bit not happy at all. So if there's some younger or sensitive members of the audience, I'll try to give you a heads up so that you can maybe distract people from looking at the screen while I go past those slides. Okay, so what is wildlife trafficking? So wildlife trafficking is the illegal take or movement or sale of wild animals throughout the globe that is illegal, right? So things without permits. There's so many aspects to wildlife trafficking. The obvious ones that pretty much everybody knows about are like elephant ivory, rhino horn, sea turtle eggs are another big one, illegal coral movement. The Asian songbird crisis is one that not everybody has heard of, where songbirds are captured from the wild and sold, and they're used for singing competitions. And then like the picture you see on the bottom right, that is actually here at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Office in Torrance. You can see, there's so many things that parts of animals are used for, like coats and trinkets and just all kinds of odd things. There's so many aspects of wildlife trafficking. A lot of it is very cruel for the animals. Live animals are captured, and most of them don't make it through the capture process. They're kept in terrible conditions. They're crammed in cages all together, like this picture of like a tiger in a suitcase. That's not something that probably anybody here would think is reasonable, right? And I'll skip that one, sorry. I meant to give you a warning. There's also the part of the trade that is extremely wasteful, where like elephants, it's just their tusks, and they'll take the elephant completely. It'll die because of it. Rhinos also. Pangolins, you might have heard of, lately been known as the most widely trafficked mammal, right? And it's just for their scales. And those scales are like rhino horn, just keratin, like our nails. So there's not really a good reason for doing that, other than greed, as we see here. If any of you follow these lecture series, you may have seen the lecture, I think it was in 2019 maybe. It was Dr. Barbara Taylor, and she went very in depth about the vaquita, which is the small porpoise that is a victim of bycatch. So the big fish is called a totoaba, and that is caught there. They are endemic to the Sea of Cortez, right? So they're only found in the Sea of Cortez, the totoaba and the vaquita. And they want the swim bladder from the totoaba, and that swim bladder is sold. It's used in soups and in traditional medicine, and also as an investment. So it's a swim bladder from a fish, right? But it has this artificial value. And these vaquita are caught in the nets and drown. And no one really knows if there's any left. There was less than 10 the last time anybody could count. So it's a really dire and brutal trade. And the wildlife trade is basically run the same way that the trade in human trafficking and gun trafficking and drug trafficking. It's run by organized crime, and they're very nimble, right? So they can really see a situation, take advantage of it, get in, get out, and so it's very difficult to catch people and to track it. And obviously the internet has not made it any easier, especially with the dark web. So people can traffic a lot through these avenues that are not easy to trace at all. And then the other part to wildlife trafficking was the pandemic, which we all just lived through. It affected every single person on this planet, right? And that, all the evidence points to the fact that it was illegally trafficked wildlife. And these animals, like I showed before, they're put in very, very stressful situations, and that means they start shedding viruses. And then if people are around those animals, then the virus jumps to humans. And so if we don't do something about wildlife trafficking, that is not going to be a once-in-a-lifetime situation, right? It's going to keep happening again and again. Dan Ash is the head of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums that Julie mentioned, and he used to work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife also, so he has a lot of experience in these things. So this is a quote from him. Part of the good news is that there are a lot of organizations that are working to end the illegal trade in wildlife. CITES stands for the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. And they are the international body that basically regulates trade in wildlife. So animals and plants all fall under CITES. There's about 184 members that have signed on to CITES. Most of the UN has signed on. There's a few exceptions. And so it's this coalition of governments that have all agreed to not traffic in certain species, and they'll support each other if animals or plants come in from another country, then they'll all try to uphold the law. And one interesting point I think about CITES is that their whole goal is to make sure that the trade of wild animals and plants does not threaten the survival of a species. So it's kind of a unique distinction, because they're not saying there can be no trade in any kind of wildlife, right? There are some legitimate trade, and there could be more legitimate trade. I mean, we talked about the elephants and the rhino. Both rhino horn and elephant tusks will regrow. There is no need to take the whole animal, but it's very difficult. I spent some time in South Africa, and a lot of the landowners at the time were dehorning their rhinos to hopefully save them from poachers. If they didn't have a horn, the poachers wouldn't kill them. And so we were asking them, why don't you just harvest the horn and sell it legally and drop the bottom out of the illegal market? And they're like, yeah, we've looked at that, but there's not enough of us and not enough rhino horn to make the bottom drop out of the market. So it's a really complicated situation, and obviously there's a lot of people on the ground that want to make a living, and they see it as a easy way to make a lot of money, and then they get caught up with these organized crime syndicates, and it just snowballs and snowballs, right? So under CITES, there's about 5,800 species of animals. So there is a wide net of protection, but it can be really hard to enforce. There is a whole group of partners that work on enforcing wildlife trade and things coming in and out of countries. The International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime, and they are focused on, basically completely focused on stopping this illegal trade. There's a lot of big organizations that are part of this consortium, like Interpol, for one, the World Bank Group, the UN Office of Drug and Crime is part of it, so there's really big groups. I'm not a law enforcement expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm an animal manager, but I really encourage you, if you want more information and you want to go really deep on this topic, you should look up some of these organizations, because they have some reports that they put out. Like most things, there weren't a lot of reports during the pandemic, but you can find a lot of information if you want to look more at the law enforcement aspect of this whole big situation. And then from those global organizations, we have what happens here in the U.S. as far as law enforcement, Homeland Security, ICE. We're pretty familiar with ICE here in Southern California, but they are the Customs Enforcement Agency, and so they patrol the borders. Also, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, And then here in California, we have the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they do a lot of the law enforcement side of things. It's really difficult for them. So they have it broken up into regions, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Southern California region stretches from the Mexican border all the way up to about the Fresno-ish, Bakersfield-ish area. And there were 4 agents to cover that entire area, right? And just the border with Mexico is pretty long, and a lot of trade comes up that way. So they actually were going to get some more people before the pandemic. I hope they did. I don't know if the pandemic stopped them from hiring more officers, but it's really very, very, very difficult for them to enforce everything. They estimate that they can only inspect about 10% of what is coming across any border. And here in LA, right, we have LAX, we have the Port of Los Angeles, we have the border. We have a lot of things that can allow these shipments to come in. And so it makes it really hard when you're only inspecting 10% of it. You know, there's that whole other 90%. And people just, it's like a gamble, right? You figure you got a 90% chance of not getting caught, so you may as well try it. So it can be really discouraging, but this is where zoos and aquariums really matter. So the LA Zoo has been assisting with confiscations of illegally held or trafficked animals since it was moved to its new location in 1966. So we've been doing it for a long time. We haven't really kept all the records since back in 1966, but just in the last decade, there's been about 200 animals that have actually come to the zoo because of trafficking, and many, many more situations where we have assisted with the cases. It can range anywhere from, like, somebody didn't know that in California you can't have a pet ferret, so we'll go and help get the ferret, right? To things like helping with an FBI raid, you know, that you have to have police protection before you can go in. So it really runs the gamut. All of the animals in this picture are at the LA Zoo, and all of them came from wildlife trafficking. So you can actually come to the zoo and see some animals that are thriving because they were lucky enough to get the proper care and not end up still in the trade. Or sometimes, you know, even if they get caught, they send them back across the border, and then they pop up again, you know, a few days later at another section of the border. So a lot of people, I think, don't realize that the law enforcement agents, it's in their name, right? Fish and Wildlife. You think that they know everything there is to know about wildlife, but they don't, right? They're law enforcement agents. They know a lot about the law and what size fish you can catch and what season you can catch it in, and they deeply care about wildlife. They want them to be okay, but they don't even always know what the animal is that they have just confiscated, right? So that's where we can help, because that is our area of expertise, is what we do. That and the fact that the longer they have to spend trying to identify an animal and figure out what it needs for critical care and how do you keep it alive and where am I going to house this thing, all those seconds and minutes that they are spending doing that are seconds and minutes that all their evidence is going away, right? So they may have arrested this person, but if they're here with this animal trying to figure out what to do with it, this person has their friends and their circle of bad actors that are wiping their phone clean and wiping their computer clean and erasing all the evidence. So it's really critical that these animals get into proper care right away for the animal and to help stop this situation. I have some of the cases that we've helped with. This is our curator of reptiles, Ian Riccio, and these stuffed camels that you see him working on right there came in through LAX, and the camels were supposed to be stuffed animals, but they were sort of moving and undulating like this, and the customs people are like, that's not right. So they also, the law enforcement people also don't have experience with dangerous situations, right? So they often, our reptile guys get called a lot because that is a lot of what comes in. So they called Ian, he went down there, and when he opened up these camels, they were stuffed with Egyptian cobras and also deadly scorpions. These are some of the scorpions, all those little pieces of paper that you see on the side there are little homemade envelopes, and every single one of those envelopes had a scorpion in it. And these are an extremely dangerous genus of scorpions that can literally kill people. So it's obviously you don't want this stuff getting into the wrong hands, and you don't want anybody accidentally coming into contact with right expertise to handle those kind of situations. This next one is not as graphic as the one that I skipped quickly past, but it's not great either. So this was a shipment of 94 endangered songbirds. Again, came through LAX. And this was just a routine stop. This wasn't a tip-off. It wasn't that anything was undulating with live animals inside. This was a guy just coming in with a suitcase, and they stopped him for a routine customs check and found all these birds that were stuffed in socks. And of those 94 birds, only 8 of them survived that journey. Then they didn't even all survive the quarantine period, because these animals are extremely stressed out, as one would be if one was stuffed in a sock in a suitcase for, 14 plus hours. It takes a huge toll on wildlife, and they can sell these animals for so much money that it's worth it. They don't care how many they lose, because they're going to make so much money from the few that are left, right? So it's really a gut-wrenching situation. So when we get these cases at the zoo, we can leverage our expertise, right? We have a team of veterinarians that know how to take care of wildlife, and a team of caregivers that understand what this animal needs to decompress and what nutrition it needs. So we really can help these animals thrive if we can get to them in time. Sometimes it's a little difficult because we don't know the extent of what is wrong with that animal until much later. Like, they don't usually live a normal lifespan, but we can give them the best life that they can have post-traumatic experience, right? So, when you come to the zoo, you're helping these animals just by your support there. This is Jolie, one of our little favorites. She came in with that shipment I just showed you. She's an Indo-Chinese green magpie, and the picture on the left is when Jolie first arrived. You can see her colors faded, her feathers are really rough. She wasn't in great shape. And then 8 months later, after being in zoo care, you can see how beautiful she is. And she is quite the character. Even though this bird was wild caught, she's super interested in what is going on around her. And if you are familiar with Joel Sartori, the National Geographic photographer who does the photo arc, Jolie is about to board the photo arc, and I think next month you'll be able to see her there. So she was one of Joel's favorite subjects ever, because she was so happy to pose for him. And then some of you might recognize Reggie the alligator, probably our most famous confiscated illegal former pet that we have at the zoo. He was dumped at Lake Machado, which is in Harbor City, and he actually lived there for like several years, more than 2 years. He happily lived in Lake Machado, evading several capture attempts. They tried many times to get him, but he was pretty wily. And then one day he was out sunning himself, and animal control people saw him, and they called Ian, again, our intrepid curator of reptiles, and said, hey, Reggie's out on the bank. Do you think you could catch him? And Ian said, well, maybe. Let me get my guys together. And they all went down there, and they were able to capture Reggie, and he came to the zoo and has lived there for the last 16 years, and he was joined about 5-6 years ago by Tina, who herself was an illegal pet, and she had been confiscated by animal control and lived at the Pasadena Humane Society, and she was getting too big for the area that they had her in. So she came, and her and Reggie fortunately got along. Sometimes alligator introductions can be kind of dicey, but they seem to get along great, and they've lived happily there ever since. So, and then I would be remiss if I did not show you some of the work that the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium has done. They have taken in a seahorse back in 2005, maybe, and she came from Peru. She was illegally trafficked. She was caught. Whoever was trafficking her was caught, and she came to the Cabrillo and lived for about 6 years here, which is quite a long time for a seahorse. So she did really well. These are some of her descendants that live in the tank that you can see here today. So she did really well, and upon her passing from natural causes, she was actually added to the museum collection. So she is still here helping people learn about wildlife trafficking and also about the biology of seahorses. Okay, so Julie mentioned the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and both the Los Angeles Zoo and the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium are accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and that basically means that we have been inspected and that we can prove that we provide exemplary animal care and welfare to all of the residents of our facilities. And so it takes really an army in order to combat something like wildlife trafficking that is a global problem with people like organized crime behind it. So in 2018, the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance came under the umbrella of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And tonight, actually, our fearless leader of WTA is here in the audience. Sarah's here. Hi, Sarah. So this is a group of us that focus on the wildlife trafficking that is going on everywhere. So there are three basic main pillars of what we do in the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance. We want to reduce the demand. We want to make sure that there's laws and regulations and policy that can help reduce illegal wildlife trade. And we know that we need to provide a cooperative and coordinated response and protocol for the care of confiscated wildlife. That is kind of tricky, so we decided that we should have a pilot program here in Southern California, and if that goes well, then we can take that nationwide so that we have better immediate care for all the animals that come through. We kind of have a joke that what do you do when your phone rings at 4:45 on Friday afternoon? And the answer is put down your cocktail because it's Fish and Wildlife calling for you to help with a confiscation. And that's, a pretty normal thing for me. So the Southern California Wildlife Trafficking Network began in 2019. When a group of us from a diverse array of organizations met in San Diego. So we had zoos, we had aquariums, we had universities, we had private people that work with wildlife, we had sanctuaries, and we had law enforcement. And we all got together to start trying to put together what it would take to have this network. Then that thing called COVID happened, and we soldiered on through, and we met a lot virtually during that time, and then finally got back together in 2022, 23, 22. At the LA Zoo. And we have been working really hard to try to figure out what it's going to look like. We have desired outcomes. We want to make sure that the value of wildlife is maximized. We want to make sure that it gets confiscated and that it doesn't go back across the border because there's no place for the officers to have these animals or to make sure they have a good home. We don't want it to go back to the illegal trade. We want it to have really good care from the point of seizure to the placement. Like I said before, we want law enforcement to be able to focus on their mission, and we want to make sure that the care and welfare is supported with adequate resources. It can be super expensive to keep a lot of these animals, which is another reason why they're terrible in the pet trade, right? They need a lot of different vet care and resources. A lot of people think they're cute when they're babies and don't have the resources as they get older. So one of the things that became very apparent from talking with our law enforcement friends is that they needed a quick way to get these animals into care, and they basically needed one point of contact. So when we started looking at what does it take to get these animals from confiscation to care, this is what we started with. Obviously, don't read this because it's a whole lot of our brains going splat on a piece of paper. And so through a lot of hard work over the last 4 years and a lot of effort on the part of a lot of people, we went from that to this. So this is where law enforcement can make one call. That person will have the network, because we are going to be a network, and then we'll have our check sheet. Yep, done, done, done. This animal's in care. We have gotten the first two parts done. I'm super happy to say that just a couple weeks ago, through the cooperative effort of AZA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the funds were secured to actually hire a person to be the point of contact. Because we were all like, who's going to be that point of contact? They can't ever go on vacation. They have to have their phone glued to their ear at all times. So we actually have a position now that can focus on that. I've already been like, I need help, because literally just this week I'm getting calls about confiscations, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. So it's very, very needed, and we're super happy to actually be bringing this whole thing to fruition after, like I said, working through the pandemic and everybody putting their brains together to figure out how we're going to make this happen. So now our next step is to get everybody's going to have to apply to be in the network, because like we said, we don't want these animals ending up back in the hands of bad actors. So we're going to have a vetting process for the facilities that say that they will hold animals. So we're about to send out the applications for that, which will be probably a lot of AZA facilities, but there's a lot of great sanctuaries out there here in Southern California, and a lot of facilities that can help with that. So we're about to do that. So that's our next step, and tune in maybe a year from now, we'll have this all going. So the other part to this is public awareness. Thank you all for coming tonight. Now you're all aware. And the Wildlife Trafficking Association has piloted a Not a Pet campaign. The LA Zoo is one of 3 facilities that are piloting this program. So our goals are that exotic pets, making people aware that exotic pets may be illegal, making people aware that the illegal trade can lead to zoonotic diseases. Zoonotic diseases are diseases that can transfer from animals to people or the other way around, so it's not good for anybody. Think pandemic again. And how people can take action. So at the zoo, we designed some graphics like this one on the right, and we put them in key locations with animals that we have that have been part of the wildlife trafficking trade. So there's one by Reggie the alligator. There's one by our Bali mynas. I don't know if you noticed my pictures that we used for the promotion of tonight's talk had the Bali mynas, which are really, really beautiful white myna birds with Dodger blue around their eyes, so they're very LA. And we had a couple of them that came in from a big confiscation like that one that I showed you, and they have now been paired up with mates, and they have reproduced. So it's really exciting that they're contributing. Bali mynas are a critically endangered species. They live on the island of Bali only, and as you can imagine, anything that lives on an island has a high chance of being endangered because of human population growth and human-wildlife conflict. So there's less than 50 of them in the wild now. So any amount of that genetic material that we can capture, basically, and hopefully at some point re-release is really important. So those animals are, even though they're not wild where we want them to be, they are contributing to the, basically saving that species. So for part of the Not a Pet campaign, WTA came up with some videos that will appeal to hopefully people that are thinking about getting an exotic animal as a pet. So we want to be able to stop people from buying animals that may be illegal or that they may not be equipped to handle. So I'll just show you, there's 3 different ones. There's one with a spider monkey that you'll see. There's one with an African gray parrot and one with a box turtle. I believe it's a box turtle. So it can appeal to different people that might want these pets for different reasons.
Hello, I'm a really adorable spider monkey, and you might want me for a pet. Wait, that's a terrible idea. I'll need to be a legally able to a wild home along with millions of other wild animals to be sold as pets. Many of us will suffer and die in the process, and it may be carrying new diseases and can make you and others really sick. And caring for me is a long-term commitment. It can be quite challenging. So even though I'm adorable, if you really love me, don't leave me be. Visit notapet.net to learn more.
It's cute, right? I love the part at the end where the living room is trashed and the monkey's sitting there playing with who knows what, because that's exactly what would happen if you had a spider monkey in your house. So then people always say, well, what can I do? So here in Southern California, there actually is a hotline that you can call or text. And it's called Californians Turn In Poachers and Polluters, CalTIP. And you can find it on the website of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife or California Department of Fish and Wildlife. But if you, we have actually gone and helped with confiscations of animals that people saw in their neighbor's backyard and called it in. We have a lot of crazy stories, like we got an alligator out of somebody's backyard. There's lots of primates that people have, like ring-tailed lemurs are big in the pet trade, spider monkeys. There's a lot of them out there, and a lot of times people will call in a tip. And sometimes it's because people just don't know, but a lot of times the people that have these animals have much more nefarious things going on, right? So they do it as a means of making money. You can sometimes sell these primates for $10,000 to $15,000, and they use that money for the drug and firearms trades, right? So it's all really horribly tied up together. These things can really destabilize entire regions, entire governments, because these animals are being taken from where people would normally go to see them. A lot of times they'll get, like the birds, like Bali mynas, they're practically gone from Bali, and Bali could have tourists come and see those animals, right? Like ecotourism, but they're not there for people to see. So the people that live in these countries where these animals come from are losing out. It's estimated that wildlife and illegal fishing and illegal logging, it can be up to $1 to $2 trillion a year. So it's really big money, and it really like I said, it destabilizes whole countries and economies and regions, and everyone needs to do their part, right? It's a really big, huge problem, but just by showing up tonight, you are helping support us stopping this kind of thing. Now, everybody here knows, tell your friends, look up more stuff like I mentioned earlier. I'm pretty sure most people here probably aren't going to go buy a monkey, but maybe you know somebody that's like, oh, it's so cute, and they're adorable. Baby spider monkeys are some of the cutest things you're ever going to see. They have those big, long, prehensile tails that they can wrap around you. Of course people want them as a pet, but you have to think beyond that, right? And think about this monkey that's going to tear your house apart because it doesn't have anything else to do. So it's really important for people to be aware and to know about it and to be able to talk about it and do their part, right? So, like I said, come to the zoo. Just coming to the zoo or your aquarium helps support that. It supports the financial end of it and helps take care of the animals too. So thanks for coming tonight. We're going to have some questions. So Julie, did you want to moderate the questions? Or?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth. That was fantastic. So, yeah, we have time for some questions. I'm just going to remind Beth to please repeat the question so that everyone at home can hear the question as well.
Okay.
And those of you that are at home, I'm hoping you can hear me through this mic. If you want to type your questions in the Q&A, we'll take a few questions from the audience, and then I will read out some questions from home.
Okay. Okay, back here, I know you were first.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Mine's kind of a little bit of a three-part question. I wanted to find out the 94 birds that you talked about that were confiscated. Did anything happen to that person? I've often heard that when these people are arrested, they go through the court system, but nothing really ever happens because they don't want to tie up the courts with these frivolous lawsuits. And my other question is, on average, about how many per week or per month do you see of these kinds of illegal confiscations?
Yep, okay.
10%.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so for everybody at home, the question was like using the 94 birds that I showed you as an example, did anything happen to that person? Does anything happen when people are caught? And also, how much do we see of that? About on average, how many cases do we see? So that person was caught and prosecuted, but the penalty is usually not very high. I don't know specifically what the penalty was for that person, and like I said, it's so tied up in organized crime that a lot of times somebody posts bail or they make so much money from it that, like, staying in jail for a few weeks is no big deal to them, right? And then, so it's really, really hard to know how much is out there. There aren't great records kept. It's hard to find what the records are. At the zoo, we probably get close to a call a week. A lot of it is reptiles, followed by birds, followed by mammals, probably in that order, because people, and in California especially, we can't have a lot of exotic animals as pets in California. The other states I've lived in, Missouri, Florida, and Texas, you can have a tiger if you want. It's a $5 permit. It's pretty simple. So when you, in California, there's a lot of things that people, we get a lot of calls for, like ferrets or axolotls are a big one that people don't think that it should be illegal, but it is. So there's a lot of that too. We get big calls maybe 4, 5, 6 times a year. Yep. So. Okay. I saw some other hands. Oh, go ahead. Here in the front.
Oh, yeah. So it seems like, what are they doing with the issue? It seems like the real issue is the demand for those illegal pets, because if people are buying them, people are wanting them. So how do you go after those people?
Yep. So the question was, that it seems like the actual issue is demand, and how do we go after those people? And you totally hit the nail on the head. It's demand, right? It's a lot of it is demand driven. In fact, all of it is demand driven, or it wouldn't be happening, right? So that's where it gets hard. So we have like our Not a Pet campaign that targets people that may be thinking about buying these animals as pets. The bigger nefarious things are harder. So that's when it's up to like the international kind of organizations and law enforcement on a global scale, like Interpol, right, that needs to take this stuff down. There's a lot of undercover work that goes on to try and get people, obviously, in Africa, it's a huge problem with poachers, and there's, a lot of work going on that scale. I know the LA Zoo supports an organization that started horse-mounted patrols that can go out in the bush even better than vehicles, and they basically are focused on protecting rhinos, and they go out and patrol like every night on their horses to keep the poachers away. So there are a lot of people doing a lot of things. It's complicated though, for sure.
If there's no consequences,
Yeah, if there's no consequences.
how are we going to stop people from
Yeah, and yeah.
something we can do with our legislators and talk to them? Or?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, it's always helpful to talk to your legislators. In 2016, there was a stop. Oh gosh, I can't quote the name of it, but it was a bill that was passed, bipartisan bill. Yay, we can all agree on something. Illegal wildlife trafficking is bad. So things get strengthened, but we're not the only country on the planet, obviously, and some countries are stronger about it than others. So it's one of those things where everybody has to just do a little bit, and hopefully at some point we're all going to get to the point where there's no more demand. I think there is movement. So this isn't a great example, but it's one I always give at talks like this. Shark finning. It is illegal to buy shark fins in some places, but it is mostly not illegal to catch sharks, cut off their fins, and throw them back in the ocean. But in the early-ish 2000s, Yao Ming, who was, he's Chinese, he's a American basketball star. He played in Houston, where I used to work, so he used to come to the zoo. He went back to China because he is a big wildlife lover, and he started telling younger people why shark finning is bad. And most of the people that he talked to didn't know that what they were eating in their soup was from a live animal that got its fins cut off and was thrown alive back in the ocean. They didn't know that that's what that was, because the Chinese translation of shark fin soup is angel wing soup. So people just had no idea. And he almost single-handedly reduced by quite a large percentage the amount of people eating shark fin soup. So it's things like that you just have to take these tiny little steps and try to raise awareness. And it's what we do. It's why I'm here, right? It's what we do at the zoo every day, and what we do in the aquarium field every day is try to help people understand. That's Sarah's whole job, is helping people understand what wildlife trafficking means and how to stop it. So there is hope.
Beth, one of the questions from home is along those lines. So let me read this first question from home. It's also from Beth. So Beth to Beth. I have donated for many years to the anti-wildlife trafficking organization called Traffic. Since this is an international trade issue, how much collaboration and communications and/or data sharing is there between the multiple organizations around the world?
Yeah, so I definitely can't tell you exactly how much data sharing there is. However, that organization that is a group of law enforcement global groups that include Interpol and the UN and the World Bank are collaborating. Traffic does a lot of work in raising awareness, as well as actually physically trying to stop it. They go undercover. They do a lot of that stuff. It's getting all the data together does prove tricky, because every country keeps data in a different way, or not at all, or a lot. So it just depends. But yeah, it would be great if there was a bank of everything that ever happened, but I definitely think you should look up the organizations that I mentioned, especially the UN Office of Drugs and Crime has some really good reports on what is going on globally. Go ahead, right here.
Yes, I've worked with the Gibbons Center in Santa Clarita since 2000, volunteered, and I know that they have a network where they've also received Gibbons from illegal pet trade, and I know that they have a kind of a global network for animal husbandry, since most of those species, if not all, are like on the endangered or critically endangered species list. Is there something similar that goes on with some of the animals that are collected that are in that, critical endangered type of situation to help proliferate their numbers?
Yeah, so when it comes to actually confiscating them, we definitely use our AZA contacts a lot. We have taxon advisory groups called TAGs and species survival programs called SSPs for short. And so when I get a call, sent taking care of it, but I know that my AZA colleagues have, so I can call them. So there is a lot of networking going on when it comes to the care and the welfare and the placement of these animals coming in. Back here.
Beth, I think China is a main customer for pangolins, which you have on your screen. I think the scales are sloughed off and ground up as a so-called aphrodisiac, which it isn't. Is there any evidence that the younger generation in China is having a more appropriate attitude to the pangolin situation?
So I don't know of...
Remember to repeat the question.
Oh yeah, sorry. The question was, pangolins seem to be a popular thing in China. Their scales are used as an aphrodisiac. And is there any evidence that the younger generation might be having a different attitude towards those kind of situations? So I've read a few things that say that the younger generation understands and is willing to act more outside of the tradition. There still is a huge call for it, and it's not just China, I have to say. Believe it or not, it happens here in the US quite a bit, way more than people want or know about or want to believe. But I think we're the second biggest consumer of illegally trafficked wildlife. We're really high up, right? And nobody would believe it, because I don't know anybody that is going to buy pangolin and use it as an aphrodisiac. I don't, but they're out there, right? We have a very diverse country, so you never know what's going on. But overall, it does seem like the younger generations are, like I said, willing to break with tradition and kind of seeing things differently than they have. It's hard, because if your family has always done this. This is a good example. We see this here. It's not wildlife, it's not wildlife trafficking, but it is illegal. We have hunters here that insist on using lead bullets. Lead bullets are the single reason that the condor is going extinct and continues to be in trouble, when there's a perfectly reasonable alternative, which is copper bullets. But they literally say, no, my father and my grandfather and his grandfather all used lead bullets. I am using lead bullets. And so it's ingrained. It's who they are, right? It's their tradition. And so getting those mindsets changed can be really, really difficult. But I think that it's happening. I mean, I see it with our younger generation that works at the zoo, right? They have a whole different attitude about it than other people. So, over here.
So there's some sea mammals like dolphins, maybe octopus, and I think some whale species that they've been suggested for personhood status, and I was wondering if any of that possibility is affecting this, and also if you know what's happening in terms of dolphins being smuggled illegally.
Oh, so the question is, there has been a lot of talk of giving animals personhood status. This person is specifically asking about dolphins or maybe octopus or other animals that are very obviously sentient, I think is what you're getting at. And does it affect, is there any effect on the wildlife trade because of that? And that is really interesting. I don't know if it is affecting the wildlife trafficking situation, like does it make people not traffic these animals? I don't know.
Or have more repercussions, like was saying,
So here in the United States, animals have not been given protection as a person would have protection. I know it's a big battle right now. It's mostly centered around elephants. And so far it has not gone through that animals have been given personhood status. But I think great apes have in European country maybe. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I would think it might. I feel like the people that believe that animals should have personhood would already not be involved in wildlife trafficking. So, it may be that there's, unless they can convince more people that that should be true, it may not have a big effect on that. But that's, yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see if there's any papers on that because it's pretty interesting. Anything else?
There's one more at home, and I was going to leave this for the end, so this can be our last question. This is from Jordy. You're doing a lot of great work to fight against wildlife trafficking, but it sounds like heavy, emotionally draining work. Do you ever experience compassion fatigue, and if so, how do you manage it?
Oh, golly, thank you for asking that question.
Jordy, that was a fantastic question.
Yep. Yeah, it can be really difficult. It can be super draining. And, I've been in the zoo field now for 30 years this year. I can't believe it. And I have had situations where we've helped with confiscations, not even just here in California, but other states. And then the person goes to court and gets the animal back. So you're over there taking care of this animal, sometimes for months and months. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, we're coming to get it because they won their court case. And it's like, crazy making, right? Sometimes you just cannot believe how can this person who obviously couldn't take care of this animal actually get it back. It's crazy, but it happens. So things like that are really difficult. It's really hard to see some of these animals come in. Sometimes we helped with a ringtail lemur confiscation. This poor little animal had such horrible nutrition that she kept getting broken bones because she had no proper calcium. And we were literally thinking, we need to euthanize this animal. This isn't right. And we all went in there. It was all our animal managers and our vet team, right? So there's like 3 vets and 3 animal managers. We're like, this is horrible, but we have to make this decision. And she was bouncing around her cage. And we're like, okay, she's really advocating for herself, right? And so we're like, okay, let's give her some time. We'll see how it goes. And she's in with our lemur group now, right? And she's still like doing great. So, things like that where you're thinking you have to like prepare yourself to make these decisions, and it's so constant sometimes. And like we had a snake that was confiscated that we took, and they wouldn't, it was, so a lot of times we can't talk about the work that we're doing when we do this because there's court case going on. So you can't talk about any specifics or even have the animals sometimes where the public can see it. It's kind of frustrating because you want to tell people, guess what, we saved these animals, and you can't. And we took this snake and we were holding it, waiting for the authorities to tell us what to do. And then they're like, oh, you have to euthanize it. And we're just like, oh my God. So yeah, it's very, very draining. And honestly, I think a lot of us, obviously everybody gets through it in their own way. Our jobs in general can be really demanding, so you have to have something outside of work. You have to. Like I have my horse, right? Every day I go ride my horse, and he's kind of a handful, so I can't think about work because I got to pay attention to make sure I don't die by flying off of him. So that it really helps me cope, right? We support each other. We have our AZA conferences twice a year, and we get together. We have our colleagues, Julie and I, and our friend Misha in the back there. We all work at different facilities, and Misha makes us laugh. And we get together, like, I don't know, maybe every couple months, and we just support each other and chit-chat and have that cocktail that I couldn't have on Friday night because they called me up and made me help with the confiscation. And so, you know, the zoo and aquarium field really is a big community, and we're always there for each other, and that is how we get through this. So that was probably really a long-winded answer, but it's a passionate topic, so.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Right here.